Now, phobias are also another kind of disorder. And in phobias, what is essential is that these are individuals who have an irrational fear of an object and the need to avoid it. So what's essential there is that they are afraid of something that in reality they shouldn't be afraid of. They're afraid of snakes and they do everything they can to avoid a snake. They're afraid of sharks to the point that they put a shark fence around their pool. They will not go swimming in a lake because they're afraid of getting eaten by a shark. That is irrational. If you are in shark-infested waters, then by all means be afraid of the shark. But typically, when there is no sharks around, you shouldn't be afraid, but yet these people are. And if they think they're going to come in contact with their fear object, they're going to have panic-like reactions. And that is what makes it a phobia. Now, there are various types of phobia. One is an agoraphobia, and that is where you're afraid of open places, open spaces. These are people who basically are homebound because they're afraid. What if I go out? What if something happens? Where do I run? How do I escape? So rather than have that occur, where do you think these people end up? They end up staying at home. And that is what the agoraphobia consists of. A specific phobia is just you're afraid of something. You're afraid of water. You're afraid of an illness. You're afraid of death. You're afraid of animals. You're afraid of heights. You're afraid of elevators. And a lot of these situations are basically learned. You learn to become afraid of animals. You learn to become afraid of heights. So that's why for specific phobias, the treatment is usually behavioral management. Social phobia is different. A social phobia is an individual who is afraid of being in social situations where something potentially embarrassing can happen. So this is an individual who probably doesn't use public restrooms. Why? Because in public restrooms something embarrassing can happen. They will not eat in public. Why? Because again, potentially something embarrassing can happen. They will not engage in any kind of public speaking for the same reason. So this is the theme of the individuals who have social phobia. And they avoid social situations, avoid public speaking, avoid eating in restaurants. So a lot of them have what's called the avoidant personality disorder. And that's something that you typically find in patients who have these social phobias. Now, the treatment of all the phobias, specifically the specific phobias, will always be behavioral management. You're going to use things like exposure, flooding, or systematic desensitization. Let's go over some of these techniques. Systematic desensitization is a type of behavioral modification. It's based on the premise that anxiety and relaxation cannot occur at the same time. They're physiological opposites. So what you're trying to do is that you're trying to replace the anxiety with relaxation. So what your therapist will do is that you will go and let's say you're afraid of heights. You go to the therapist and make a list. And that list will be from the least anxiety provoking to the most anxiety provoking. And as you start going down that list, you would imagine if you're in the first part of the list, for example, thinking of a tall building, what should happen? Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, you start sweating. That's the point that you start incorporating the relaxation techniques. Breathing exercises, whatever works for you, it doesn't matter. It's just something that has to work. Assuming that your anxiety is controlled, what's going to happen to this step? You've controlled it, you've mastered it, you're not afraid, so now you're ready to go on to the next one, which is seeing a picture of a tall building. Anxiety shoots up again. You do the relaxation techniques, what happens? The anxiety goes away. And you do the next one and the next one and the next one. And because you're doing it in a gradual order, because you're adding relaxation techniques, this is what systematic desensitization is all about, which is the ideal treatment for the treatment of phobias, specifically specific phobias. If you ever see stage fright or performance anxiety, that's an individual who's only afraid of public speaking or performing something in public. For example, you're taking karate lessons and now you're going from one belt to another. And for you to do that, you have to have some little presentation in your karate school. Well, you can't do that. So what do? You take a beta blocker, half an hour to 1 hour before the desired event. And what that does, is that it masks the external autonomic hyperactivity. So you don't sweat, you don't shake, and you're able to perform well. That is the treatment of stage fright. And stage fright, of course, is an offshoot of social phobia. So let's review this. If it's specific phobia, the treatment is behavioral modification. If it's stage fright, the treatment is beta blockers. If it's a social phobia, then the treatment will be SSRIs. Because what the SSRIs will do is that they'll help you cope with being out in public and not being fearful of embarrassing situations.